Dear students, parents and fellow citizens, the topic that we'll be discussing today is extremely important to you, to your children, to your dreams, to your aspirations. It directly concerns you, affects you, impacts you and at times even crushes you. It's about education, it's about the cost of education. This is also important for India, the future of India, a happy and prosperous India. India's first Prime Minister, Jawaharlal Nehru said, "The future of India is not in small things, but in the big things that really count, in the vision, in the spirit, in the integrity of the nation. And these are shaped by the education we give to our people." Let us look at the best and the biggest innovation that happened in education in India. In 1950, we had the first IIT. In 1956, we had the first AIMS. 59, we had the first NIT. 61, we had the first IIM. In 1963, we had the first Kendriya Vidyalaya. 1962, we had ISRO. And in 1963, we had the beautiful midday meal scheme. Many decades later, it was followed by NLUs, NID, NIFT, ISER, etc. But somewhere, we seem to have lifted the foot from the gear. We seem to have slowed down. We stopped innovating. We stopped investing. We seem to have moved our attention to smaller issues, petty issues. The big question is, are we still committed to investing in to make our people prosperous? Would India, the youngest nation in the world, lose its sheen and its claim on the demographic dividend? Let us look at some data over the past 10 to 20 years to understand this better. So to understand how the public investment happened, let us understand how we invested in creating more institutions in the country which are public institutions. And let's start with the schooling system in the country. And I've started this comparison with the 2008-9 data with 21-22 for which we actually have the data. This is a data which is called the UDISC, which essentially is the Government of India data that is coming back to you. The government schools in India in 2008 and 9 were 10.35 lakh, which jumped to 11.28 lakhs in 21-22, which is after 13 years. So in 13 years, you actually saw a 9% jump in the government schools. But what is stunning is the way the private schools went up. The private schools went up from 2.49 lakh to 3.35 lakh, almost a 90,000 jump. The private schools grew by 35% over the last 13 years, while the public government schools went up by only 9%. It simply means that the private schools have outpaced the growth of government schools in percentage terms by about 4x times. And such growth comes at a cost, which is the cost of the fee that you pay. Now let's understand how the number of colleges that we have in the country. And again, we are comparing it over the last 10, 11, 12 years, right? The government colleges in the country were about 8,837 in 2010, which jumped to 9,777 in 22-23. That's a jump of 10.63%. The private colleges jumped from 24,137 to 35,696. That's almost a 11,500 jump. What is shocking in this entire growth in the last 13 years is that of the 12,500 colleges that you actually saw an increase in the country, about 11,500 or 92.5% were by the private colleges. The government colleges grew only by about 7.5%, whereas the private colleges grew by 92.5%, or they contribute to 92.5% of the colleges that grew in the country. Of the 12,500, 11,500 almost were private colleges. The government simply stopped investing in creating more degree colleges. Now let's look at the universities in the country. In 2010-11, the total public institutions that you had, public universities you had was about 384. And the private institutions were just 178. But in 22-23, you actually have 576 in government, which means a growth of 50% over the last 12 years. But the private institutions jumped from 178 to 586, which is a 230% growth. What it means is simple. In 2010, for every one single private university, you had 2 public universities. In 22-23, just in 12 years' time, the private universities are much more than public universities in the country. So what was 2:1 kind of a advantage for the public institutions is now the private are more than public institutions in the country. So if I just summarize all these things, what exactly are we dealing with? We're dealing with about currently 79% of total colleges are private in the country. The government colleges account for only 7.5% of the growth in the last 12 years, whereas 92.5% of the growth of the colleges in the country are from the private space. In the universities, about 10 years back in 2010, there were 2 public universities for each private university. But in 2024, all in 14 years, you actually have private universities which have outstripped public universities in terms of the total number. So it is 1:1 now. And in fact, private has a slight advantage. And in private schools, if you look at it, The private schools went up by 35% vis-a-vis the government schools, which went up by about 9%, which means the private schools have outpaced government schools by about 4 times in terms of the growth percentage terms. This should alarm all of us because this obviously has an impact on the cost of education, and I'll exactly explain to you as we move ahead. With so many private schools coming in, let us understand what's the impact of this such privatization that happened on the school fees in the country, across the country. In India, the education inflation is increasing dramatically, and it is led by the fees charged at the schools. The latest national sample survey found that between 2014 and 2018, the cost of elementary education increased by 30.7% and upper primary schools cost increased by 27.5%. And this is all just in 4 years. A survey of 27,000 parents across India found that 42% parents say that their child's school fees increased by 30 to 50% just post-COVID. A parent, Udit Bhandari, who pays a fee of 30,000 rupees per month in one of the NCR schools, says, "My son's school fees has been consistently compounding at 10% per annum. The school does not even bother to explain the hike, and the higher fee simply appears on the payment app. When parents protested, they said, please look for another school for your kids." And this seems to be a continuous saga. A school in Delhi struck off the names of 13 students from the rolls for refusing to pay the high school fees, which was also disputed with the parents and did not have the permission of the DEO. Increasingly, most of the spending is going for maintenance, facilities and comforts. It is not really going for teaching and teachers. In fact, in Hyderabad, the school had to roll back its fees by 15% because one of the circulars by that state government was that at least 50% of the fee has to be spent on teachers and faculty, whereas this school was spending lesser. So the school actually had to roll back the fee from what was 1.22 lakh to about 60,000 rupees in just one single year, because they realized that much of the money was being spent on maintenance and facilities and comforts, and the DEO there hit back at the school and forced them to reduce the fees. And this seems to be a continuous thing because increasingly schools are spending a lot more money not on teaching and teachers and faculty, but are actually spending on maintenance, comforts and facilities that are being given to the students. Because parents may be also in a rat race to ensure that the child is more comfortable in a school. But this is leading to a dramatic fee inflation in schools, cost inflation in schools, which might be unsustainable for the country. But you must remember that in metro cities, the school fee ranges between 2 and 5 lakh rupees. And some of the very, very elite schools even charge 10 lakhs and 12 lakh rupees per annum. And that is very unsustainable. But the rat race continues amongst parents to ensure that their children study in the most elite school, the school that offers the best comfort. Let's look at the fees charged by IIT Bombay over a period of time. In 2008, the total tuition fee at IIT Bombay was 1,08,000 and the total cost would have been 1,12,000 excluding mess and hostel expenditure. In 24-25, that fee has jumped to 8 lakh rupees. The 1,08,000 rupees tuition fee has jumped to 8 lakh fees. The total fee has increased by about 7.2 times in about 15 years. So the inflation index as decided by the income tax department to collect taxes has increased by only 2.54 times, which means this is essentially the inflation that you're factoring in. So the fee at IIT Bombay is increased by 7.2 times, whereas the inflation is only 2.54 times. The fee increase outstripped the inflation by about 3 times. This should concern the country. Now let's go to another college, which is NIT. Right, we are dealing with NIT Tiruchirappalli, right? The fee in 2011-12 was 1.42 lakh. In 23-24, it is 5 lakh. The fee is increased by almost 4 times. And during the same time, the inflation index increased by only 1.9 times, right? Again, we're coming back to the same thing that the fee increase outstripped the inflation index by about 2 times. It doesn't stop here. As I said, the IIT fee grew by 7 times in 15 years. The NIT fees grew by 3 times in 12 years. The fee at private institutions actually have grown by about 7-8 times, which is because we have a bunch of institutions. I did not put those data up, but it's grown by about 8 times in the last 15 years. Now, when you see this problem, it is not confined to engineering is something that I can very clearly say. Let me explain to you with another thing, which is this time in the domain of law, right? Here I'm taking the NLU, National Law University in Gandhinagar, which is in Gujarat, right? The fee, which was about in 2008 or 2010, was about 5,02,500, has jumped to 8.92 lakh. In fact, it is slightly more reasonable as compared to many other domains that I'm about to show, right? But the increase was about 78% in the last 14 years, 12 to 14 years, which seems reasonable. The first 17 NLUs are the big national or public institutions in law, were established before 2012, about 17 of them actually, right? And then you actually started converting some of the existing colleges to NLUs and those kind of things have happened, right? So, because you actually stopped investing or creating more institutions, the fee in private institutions suddenly shot up because there is greater demand for law as a domain, and there are fewer good quality law institutions in the country. Take for example, Symbiosis Law Institute in Pune, right? The fee in 2010 was 5.75 lakh. It jumped to 22.65 lakh in 2024, all in 14 years. That is 4 times increase in just 14 years period. So when you look at this whole thing, you actually have a 78% jump over 18 years in GNLU. But because the supply side has come down dramatically, you actually see a massive spurt in the fee that is charged by private institutions by about 300% over the same period of 15 years, right? So public institutions have grown by about 75-80%, but private institutions have grown by about 3x, and that's what we notice across the spectrum. Now let's come to another domain, which is design, right? Here what I'm doing is I'm comparing National Institute of Design, again a Government of India enterprise institution, and we're comparing the fee of NID Ahmedabad, right? At NID Ahmedabad, the fee in 2013-14 was 4.8 lakh. It's about 5 lakh rupees. But in 24-25, it is jumped to 15.72 lakh. 15.72 lakh. Over the 11-year period, you actually see the fee increase by 3.3 times. 3.3 times. Because inflation index during the same period has jumped by only 59%, whereas the fee has jumped by 3.3 times. So the fee has outstripped the inflation index by about 6 times. And the same thing continues for any other domain also. You look at the MBBS fees that you have in the country. The private universities, the state private universities charge you a fee between 80 to 125 lakhs. The deemed private universities charge you a fee between 1.25 crores to 2 crores. The NRF for MBBS is between 3 to 4 crores. All these are out of the reach of the normal people. And the MTech fees, by the way, there's another thing that happened recently, which has happened in the year 2019, if I'm not wrong. At IITs, the MTech fee was forced to be increased to by 900% in one single year. Of course, it was phased out over 3 years, but the phasing out essentially meant that the 900% fee increase would be achieved within 3 years. Overall, the number of applications which were going for MTech dropped from about 1.5 lakh to 1 lakh between 2019 to 2021, because the fees 900% increase was something that people could not take. Now let's move to another domain, which is IIMs. Right. The fee in IIM about 20 years back or 19 years back was 3.16 lakh, and I'm now talking of IIM Ahmedabad, right? But the fee continued to increase year on year. In fact, the biggest increase happened between 2005 and 2010 when a group of people have recommended a higher fee because they wanted greater autonomy for the IIMs. And so because between 2005 and 2024 batch, the fee jumped from 3.16 lakh to 25 lakh rupees. 3.16 lakh to 25 lakh rupees. The total fee, as I said, increased 8 times over the last 18-19 years. And this is extremely sad for students who want to pursue management. So what is it that makes me sad about the fee at IIMs? To understand whether IIMs can actually rationalize the fees, we looked at the latest annual reports of IIM Ahmedabad for the financial year 2023. The balance sheet grew from 1908 crores to 2020 crores, a growth of rupees 112 crores in a year. By the way, the fee charged for 2023 is just 114 crores. The excess of income over expenditure is 38 crores. And if you add back the depreciation and amortization, the cash profit becomes 87 crores. The long-term investments that IIM holds on its balance sheet is 1,365 crores. The cash and bank balances that IIM has is 100 crores. Of the total academic receipts of 302 crores, the tuition fee of 114 crores is just 38% of the total academic receipts. In fact, the interest on investments at IIM is 102 crores, which almost equals the fee charged. For an institution that is consultant to governments on how to improve productivity, performance, and on delivering better value and better social economic benefits, most importantly, IIMs couldn't find a better way of delivering value at a smaller price, and that saddens me. They forgot the larger objective for which they were formed and made it into what Dr. Kurian famously said, Indian Institute of Management for Shampoo Salesmen. They're more keen to produce salesmen and hedge fund managers than leaders, visionaries, and pioneers. With a loan on their head, all that the IIM graduates can do is to search for the highest paying job to pay back their EMI. With the entrance examination as one of the first entry barriers, it becomes challenging for many people to even attempt to dream to be a part of IIMs. And I suspect, I was looking at any diversity report that IIMs would have, but I could not find that but for the gender diversity report, right? I suspect that the diversity at IIMs would be one of the worst that is possible, and all because the fee is so high that it's outside the reach or realm of even people with lesser incomes to think that they can be a part of IIMs. And that for me is a problem. Now, all these things would obviously have a repercussion. My generation never knew what an education loan is all about. My generation always, most of us would have passed at some point in time through public education system. It can be a government school or a government college or a government course or whatever it is, but we would have at some point in time touched base with a public education system, and that really benefited us, right? And the fee was normally paid through the salary that is earned by the parent, or a bit of what you call jugaad, where people would accumulate some kind of money and pay the fees, right? But these days, the kind of fee that is being charged, you simply cannot do without taking an education loan, and that you see very clearly. In 2001, the first education loan scheme was created, right? And it said that we'll try to create a loan where the interest rates are slightly cheaper and the process to give a loan is slightly simpler. By 2005, we actually had about 4.68 lakh students availing this education loan, and the total loan outstanding at that point in time was 6,700 crores. But by 2023, you actually have about 3.2 million students taking education loan, and the loan is close to about 100,000 crores. It's actually 96,847 as of 2023, and you know what would have happened in 2024. In my opinion, it would have crossed about 1.1 lakh crores at this point in time. I don't have data at this point in time, but that's what happened. And the important thing that you must notice is, while the number of students who are taking the loan jumped up about 7 times, the loan amount itself jumped by 14 times, which means that the loan per student also has been 2x of what it was in 2005. And obviously it reflects on the kind of cost of education that's happened in the country. And this has a spiraling effect. For a country which is trying to earn its demographic dividend, for a country which is trying to ensure that every student and every young population of this country is productive and productively contributing to the nation's growth and prosperity, you actually have in 2014, 45 million students dropping out of education system because they could not afford education, which is so sad for a country of this nature. And all these people are falling out of the education system. There is a definition, there is a term which is called not engaged in education, employment or training, which is called NEET. This NEET is not the medical examination that you're talking of, and it refers to individuals aged between 15 and 24 who are neither in school nor employed or not engaged in any form of training, right? And when you look at this group of people, the 15 to 24 and not engaged in employment, education and training, you actually have 43.8% females and 16.1% of males who are not in this, who are a part of this group, which means that 44% of females and 16% of males are neither engaged in education nor employment nor any form of training. And this would hurt your demographic dividend dramatically. In fact, there is another data that comes out again from the NSSO survey of the latest NSSO, which was done in 2019, and the report came out in 2021, where 22.58% people, 22.58% students have said that they dropped out of education because of financial constraints, which simply means that they found the education to be unaffordable enough that they could not do it. And another 21% had to move back to economic activities, which means they have to go back to earning to sustain their families. And this, for a country of our size and scale, it would be extremely harmful moving forward, that 23% of the students are dropping out of education because they could not afford education. So where does all this data and information leave us? Education is the biggest tool of empowerment. An educated nation falters less, but the cost of education in India has spiraled out of control. For a nation that dreams of reaping demographic dividend, it has far exceeded inflation, at times by 2 to 4 times. It places an unbearable financial burden on students and families. It has driven fees northward, while the quality has fallen southward. Today, 98% of India is in a mad rat race to be amongst the top 2% meritorious. The rich 2% anyway buy their way through the system. Dr. B.R. Ambedkar said famously, education is something which ought to be brought within the reach of everyone. The policy of the government is to make higher education as cheap to the middle classes as possible. The data that we presented is not a case against private investment in education. It is rather a fervent appeal for greater public investments in education. In fact, it is an appeal to institutions like IIMs with strong balance sheets to keep education affordable and work on socio-economic diversity. This is essential so that the market forces can be controlled on affordability of education and on quality of education also. India needs and Indians deserve more government schools, more government colleges and more public universities. The unsustainable education loan growth, the high dropout rates are crying for rationalizing the cost of education while increasing quality. These twin objectives can be achieved only by public investments. The growth, prosperity of a nation hinges on affordable and accessible education. So stand up. Start asking questions that concern your future, your children's future, and India's future. Start demanding better education. Start demanding more public institutions. When you speak up today, you will ensure a better future for your children tomorrow. Thank you. Namaskar.